3 News Now Web Extra.
Um, so yeah, so the sweepstakes and lottery scams, part of the study showed that the number of these scams increased during the pandemic. Why does the Better Business Bureau think that is, or what was the conclusion as to what was causing the increase in scams?
Sure. So I think it's multi-factored, like anything. There's maybe more time on the hands of those who might not be in isolation themselves. The scam artists, had the pandemic not hit, there's also just a rise in just the overall tactics and strategy used. I mean, we saw that these scams were waged on a number of fronts. It wasn't just social media influence, though that was certainly a piece of it. It was, there were phone calls that were made, there were text messages that were received. It was really just kind of a wide battle. And unfortunately, we have people with probably more time on their hands than they're used to. So that isolation that a lot of us experienced during the pandemic certainly played a role in the uptake.
And who is most susceptible to these kinds of scams?
Sure. So like many scams, unfortunately, those who are primarily targeted are those over the age of 55. That group represented nearly 3/4 of all sweepstakes, lottery, and prize scam fraud reports. And they ultimately lost more money on average. We saw that adults over the age of 55 who submitted a fraud report had lost an average of $978, while those who were between 18 and 54 lost only $279. So unfortunately, this is a more susceptible population for these scams to begin with. And maybe unsurprisingly, they parted ways with more money than their younger counterparts.
What are some typical examples of these scams that people should be able to kind of know to recognize?
Sure. So a lot of times these start with folks being told that they've won some sort of prize, some sort of lottery, some sort of sweepstakes award, and they might not know that they even entered into those lottery systems. But they're also being told not only did you win, but in order to collect your winnings, you need to part ways with some money. That, of course, will never be the case in any of but whether it's publishers, clearinghouse, or the lottery, you'll never need to be parting ways with a substantial amount of money to collect, future earnings. And unfortunately, in this report, we saw a lot of folks being told, to file basically like taxes on an award that didn't exist. So, some of the strategies certainly depended on the victim at hand, but it did follow a pretty similar cadence.
So one thing that is mentioned, I think, in the report is that typically the scammers, or quite often the scammers, will ask people to send them this fee or this transaction via a gift card. Is there ever a situation where you've genuinely won something that people would actually ask you to pay them, or ask for you to buy gift cards to make any kind of payment?
There is not. There is no situation in which you will be asked to, purchase gift cards, send gift cards in the mail in order to collect a prize. That is a telltale sign that what you are seeing is fraudulent, and that you should immediately report the incident to authorities.
What are some other red flags that people should look out for?
Sure. Unfortunately, this was a sophisticated attack. A lot of times, especially on the social media side, they were, duplicating the profiles of people that, the victim actually trusted. And so they thought that they were being contacted by someone who might be a friend, might be a family member, but was an imposter, unfortunately. So, there's little you can really do there unless you have somebody, kind of monitoring checks and balances for you consistently. But you should also always contact a family member or your bank if you're going to part ways with a significant sum of money in a lot of these cases, just so you have a second set of eyes on something. Another telltale sign too was misspellings. We saw a lot of promotional materials, either in print or digital form, where there were clear grammatical mistakes, grammatical errors that somebody might pick out pretty readily. But if you're not looking for it, it's easy to kind of gloss over those mistakes and those inconsistencies. And ultimately, those inconsistencies really, add up to something that's not at all credible.
Sorry, I muted you again. And what should people do if they suspect that an offer that they get in the mail, by social media and email, if they're concerned that it's fraudulent, or if it just kind of takes them by surprise? What are some steps that they could take to verify whether or not it's a legitimate offer or winning?
Sure. Well, one thing is, if it's a website that you're being, targeted or sent to, is to do your due diligence and to look up that site and see if, they have any sort of prize or sweepstakes offerings, and also to recall whether or not you applied in the first place. If you ultimately find that there is fraudulent activity, or that you see something that's suspicious, please report those scams on Scam Tracker. We have those on a site. A link available on the Better Business Bureau website. I should also contact your local authorities just so they are aware, and if possible, to keep that kind of content in a safe place, so that way the authorities or the scam trackers involved can kind of get a better sense of the strategies that are being employed, so they can stay up to date, because these strategies, unfortunately, are constantly evolving.
How often, in addition to gift cards, we talked about that being one way people send money to someone who is scamming them, how often do you see wire transfers or any sort of like bank to bank money transfer? I know sometimes banks and Western Union will flag things that are suspicious. But do you have any tips for people who are maybe asked to send a wire transfer, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely contact your bank first before the mistake or the transaction or transference is made. Again, a lot of it is so sophisticated that it's really important to not kind of diminish maybe the strategies employed, but also to get a second set of eyes. I think is just critical these days. I personally will run things by my wife if there are things that I find suspicious before the mistake is made, and that's just purely, I think a strategy that everybody should employ. But reaching out to the banks, that's why they're there. They're there to answer your questions. They should have customer service representatives who can help you kind of walk through maybe the steps that would need to be taken if it turned out that this wasn't a fraudulent activity. But it's important to let others know that something has happened before rather than after.
Do you have a sense of how many people in Nebraska, or how much money in Nebraska has been lost to these scams? I know I've seen, I know it's in the millions, if not tens of millions, but I don't know if you have any current data on how much money might have been lost just in Nebraska or Nebraska and Iowa.
Sure. Well, there's unfortunately, it's so complicated that we have all this information on Scam Tracker, which I would encourage you to check out. But there are so many. It's so interlinked. I mean, there are so many factors, and it's not necessarily that it's one thing and not the other. It might be two or three things. And so we also don't have information specific to our states. We do know that there were victims and that there were people who were targeted, but unfortunately, we don't have a lot of cut and dry numbers for our area. And that's because, again, some of these algorithms and some of these strategies that are employed are so complex and sophisticated now that it really veers on 3 to 4 different types of scams.
Is there anything else that I didn't ask you that you want to say about this recent study? I mean, I know it seems like these scams happen pretty regularly, but they're always evolving. There's always some new tactic that they come up with to fool people. So I don't know if there's something you want to say specifically about this, or what you discovered was unique to the pandemic in particular.
Sure. Well, I do think that the pandemic brought a lot of things, unfortunately, to a halt. One thing that it didn't do was stop scamming. And if anything, we saw a major uptick in both the amount of interest and the amount of dollars that were profited from through these scams, these prize scam opportunities. So it's unfortunate that when people are perhaps most gullible or most susceptible, that people would be willing to prey on that. But that's the unfortunate reality. So we could always be doing more to be more secure as a society. And unfortunately, this is just a reminder that we still have a ways to go.
Do people ever get their money back, or is it usually just gone once they pay it out?
It's very rare. A lot of these scams too originate overseas, over bodies of water and other jurisdictions. So it's very, very unlikely that that folks who have parted ways with tens of thousands of dollars ever see that money again. It's very hard to trace, where it's even being sent, and typically it's sent somewhere and then taken somewhere else. So it's unfortunately really hard to follow that trail of breadcrumbs, which is why it's so important, so critical to make those steps, take those steps ahead of time to prevent the scam from happening at all.
I didn't really have any other questions. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add or that you want people to know.
Sure. I think the tax loophole was really something unique about this, that folks were being asked to pay taxes on something before they were to receive what that something was. And in this case, monetary gain. You're never going to be asked to pay taxes ahead of time, right? And unfortunately, it's not. We like to think that we're just one transaction or one step away from unlocking a reward at the end of the rainbow, and unfortunately, that's just not the case. And so I think that a lot of the time we're being preyed upon by folks who know, frankly, a lot about our personal lives. They take very detailed notes about friends and family, and little character ticks. These are not off the cuff operations. These are very sophisticated and very coordinated efforts. But the tax loophole was something that was certainly unique about this study, and unfortunately, it's probably not going away anytime soon.